Have you ever looked at someone and decided their entire future in a single glance? I did. It became the greatest mistake of my life. My name is Daniel Carter, and for more than 30 years, I believed one simple truth. Money protected the people you loved. I worked every sunrise and every sunset to build Carter Ranch into the finest ranch in the county. Every fence post carried my sweat. Every acre reminded me of promises I had made to my late wife, Sarah. When Sarah died, I stood beside her grave and made another promise. "I'll take care of Emily," I whispered. "No one will ever break her heart." From that day forward, my daughter became my entire world. She grew into the kindest young woman I had ever known. She smiled like her mother, laughed like her mother, and somehow carried the same gentle heart that Sarah had always possessed. Watching her grow gave me purpose, but it also filled me with fear. I had seen too many men make promises they never intended to keep. I wasn't going to let that happen to my little girl. One warm afternoon, while I sat on the front porch checking ranch accounts, I heard the sound of an old pickup truck struggling up my dusty driveway. The engine coughed. The brakes squealed. The truck finally stopped in front of my house. I looked up and frowned. I've never seen that truck before. A tall young cowboy climbed out. His boots were covered in dust. His jeans were faded. His shirt had been patched more than once. Nothing about him suggested wealth. Before I could ask why he was there, Emily stepped out of the house. "Dad," she called with a nervous smile. "There's someone I'd like you to meet." She walked straight to the young man and stood beside him. Something inside me tightened. The cowboy removed his hat. "Mr. Carter," he said respectfully. "My name is Luke Dawson." I nodded once. "What brings you here, son?" He looked directly into my eyes. "I came to ask for your blessing." "My blessing?" "Yes, sir." "For what?" He took a slow breath. "I love Emily." My heart sank. "I want to marry your daughter." For a moment, I honestly thought I had misheard him. Then, I looked at his old truck, I looked at his worn boots, looked at his empty hands, and I asked myself one question. How could a man who had so little possibly give my daughter the life she deserved? At that moment, I didn't realize I was measuring the wrong thing. I wasn't looking at his heart. I was looking at his wallet. And before this story was over, that mistake would cost me almost everything I had spent my entire life believing. I stood up from my chair and slowly walked across the porch until I was standing only a few feet from Luke. He didn't look away. Most young men would have lowered their eyes. Most would have shifted nervously or searched for the right words. Luke simply stood there, holding his hat against his chest. "So," I said, "you want to marry my daughter?" "Yes, sir." "What do you own?" He answered honestly, "Not much." "Do you have land?" "No, sir." "Cattle?" "No." "A savings account big enough to support a family?" He gave a small shake of his head. "No, sir." I folded my arms, then explained something to me. "I'm listening." "How do you expect to provide for Emily?" He didn't rush his answer. "I'll work." I couldn't hide my disappointment. "Working is one thing. Providing is another." "I understand." "No." "Luke, I don't think you do." Emily stepped closer. "Dad." I raised my hand gently. "Please let him answer." She nodded, although I could see the hurt in her eyes. I looked back at Luke. "You say you love my daughter." "I do." "Love doesn't pay hospital bills." "I know." "Love doesn't buy a home." "I know." "Love doesn't feed children." "No." Every answer he gave was calm. Every answer made me more frustrated. Finally, I asked the question that had been burning inside me. "Why should I trust you with the most important person in my life?" Luke took a deep breath before speaking. "Because I'll never stop choosing her." I frowned. "What does that mean?" "It means there will be hard days." He glanced at Emily with a gentle smile. "There will be days when we're tired. There will be days when money is short. There will be days when life feels unfair." He looked back at me. "But she'll never face those days alone." The confidence in his voice surprised me. It wasn't arrogance. It was quiet certainty. I still wasn't convinced. "My daughter has never had to worry about whether the bills would be paid." "I know. I've spent my entire life making sure of that. And she's blessed because of it." "Then why should I let her trade security for uncertainty?" Luke answered softly. "I'm not asking you to trade security." "What are you asking?" "I'm asking you to trust my character." Before I could reply, Emily reached for his hand. "Dad," she said, her voice trembling. "I've never asked you for anything this important." I looked at her. "I love him." The words hung in the air. "I know you think I'm making a mistake," she swallowed. "But you're judging him before you've even given him a chance." I wanted to argue. Instead, I looked once more at Luke's old truck parked in my driveway. Everything about him told me he had nothing. Then Luke quietly spoke the sentence that followed me for weeks afterward. "Mr. Carter, I may be poor today, but I'll spend every tomorrow making sure your daughter never doubts that she's loved." They left a few minutes later, walking side by side toward that battered old pickup. Watched until the dust swallowed them. I believed I had seen a poor young cowboy chasing a dream. Had no idea I had just watched the richest man I would ever meet drive away from my home. For the next several days, I couldn't get Luke's words out of my head. "I may be poor today, but I'll spend every tomorrow making sure your daughter never doubts that she's loved." I wanted to dismiss them. I wanted to believe they were nothing more than pretty words. After all, anyone could make promises. Keeping them was another story. So instead of asking questions, I decided to find my own answers. Before sunrise one morning, I climbed into my truck and drove quietly into town. I parked where Luke wouldn't notice me. Not long after, his old pickup rattled down the street and stopped outside the general store. He climbed out carrying a toolbox. An elderly rancher waved from across the road. "Luke." Luke smiled immediately. "Morning." "Mr. Jenkins, I'm sorry to bother you again." "You never bother me." The storm knocked down my back. "Fence. I'll take care of it. I can only afford to pay you a little." Luke laughed. "Then don't pay me." The old man looked embarrassed. "I can't let you work for free. You helped my mother years ago. I haven't forgotten." The two of them walked toward the damaged fence. Stayed hidden inside my truck for nearly 3 hours. Luke worked without taking a break. He lifted heavy posts. He stretched wire. He replaced broken boards. Sweat soaked through his shirt. But he never complained. When the work was finished, Mr. Jenkins reached into his pocket. "Please." Luke stepped back. "No. Sir, you earned it. I already have everything I came for." The old rancher frowned. "What do you mean?" Luke smiled, a chance to help. He tipped his hat and walked away. I watched in complete silence. No one was watching him. No one was praising him. There were no cameras, no applause, just a young man doing the right thing because it was the right thing to do. I followed him. Again. This time he stopped at a small white farmhouse on the edge of town. A little boy ran outside. "Luke." Luke laughed. "Hey, buddy, you came back." "I told you I would." The boy hugged him tightly. An older woman stepped onto the porch. "You brought groceries again?" "Just a few things. You've already helped us enough." Luke shook his head. "You'd have done the same for my family." The woman wiped away a tear. "I wish there was some way to repay you." "There is." "How?" "When someone else needs help someday." He smiled warmly. "Help them." I sat behind the steering wheel, unable to move. Everything I believed about him was beginning to fall apart. On the drive home, I kept asking myself one question. If Luke was pretending, who was he pretending for? No one had seen him. No one even knew he had been there. That evening, Richard Hayes came to visit. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned back in his chair. "I heard that poor cowboy is still chasing Emily." I nodded. "He is." Richard laughed. "Daniel, your daughter deserves a man with money, not a dreamer." I didn't answer. For the first time, I wasn't completely sure Richard was right anymore, and that single doubt was about to change everything. For the first time in months, I stopped counting what I had lost. Instead, I started noticing what I still had. I had Emily. I had Luke. I had people who stood beside me when there was nothing left to gain, and that was something money could never buy. One evening, while I sat alone in my bedroom, I opened an old wooden box that belonged to Sarah. Inside were photographs, memories, and a collection of letters she had written years before. I hadn't touched them since the day she passed away. My hands trembled as I picked up the first letter. The moment I saw her handwriting, my heart felt heavy. "Sarah," I whispered her name. I unfolded the paper. My dear Daniel, if you are reading this, then life has probably tested you in ways you never expected. I smiled sadly. You always knew me. I continued reading. I know you. When something hurts you, you build walls. You convince yourself those walls are protection. My eyes filled with tears. She was right. But remember this. A wall can keep pain away, but it can also keep love out. I stopped reading for a moment. The room became silent. Then I continued. Money can build a house. Money can build a business. Money can build a ranch. My hands tightened around the letter. But only love can build a family. A tear fell onto the paper. For years, I thought I was protecting Emily. But maybe I had been protecting my own fears. Sarah had understood something I had forgotten. A person wasn't valuable because of what they owned. They were valuable because of who they were. The next morning, I found Luke repairing the old barn. Luke, he looked up. Morning. Daniel, I smiled. You're still coming here every day? He laughed. Is that a problem? No, I walked closer. I just don't understand you. He smiled. Most people don't. I looked around the barn. You lost nothing when my money disappeared. No, because you never wanted anything from me. That's right. I took a deep breath. When you first came here, I thought you were trying to take my daughter away. Luke became serious. I would never do that. No now. I looked at him. You were trying to build a life with her. Yes. And I almost destroyed that. He shook his head. You were scared. I was wrong. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then I said the words I'd been carrying for months. I'm sorry. Luke looked surprised. For what? For seeing your empty wallet and ignoring your full heart. His eyes softened. Thank you for saying that. That afternoon, I invited Luke and Emily to dinner. Not as a test, not as a formality, as family. During dinner, I finally asked Luke the question that had been on my mind since everything changed. Why did you stay? He looked at me. What do you mean? After I lost everything, he smiled. Daniel, I didn't come here because of your land. He reached for Emily's hand. I came here because I love your daughter. The room became quiet. Then he said, I would have stayed if you owned 1,000 acres. I would have stayed if you owned nothing. Because my reason was never your money. It was your family. That night, for the first time in years, my home felt complete again. After that night, something inside me changed forever. I stopped seeing Luke as the poor cowboy who wanted to marry my daughter. I started seeing him as the man who had already proven he belonged in our family. Months passed. The ranch was different, smaller than before. But somehow, it felt bigger. The empty spaces were filled with laughter. The quiet mornings were filled with hope. And the porch where I once judged Luke became the place where we shared our best memories. One morning, Sheriff Mason arrived at the ranch. I knew something important had happened by the serious look on his face. Daniel, Sheriff. He removed his hat. I thought you should hear this from me. I invited him inside. What happened? He placed a folder on the table. Richard Hayes has been officially charged. I looked down at the papers. With what? Fraud. He opened the folder. Years of stolen investments. Fake contracts. Forged documents. I slowly shook my head. So, many people trusted him. That's why his crimes hurt so. Many. I expected anger. I expected satisfaction. But all I felt was sadness. Sheriff Mason noticed. You don't seem happy. I looked toward the window. I wanted justice. That's what happened. No. I paused. But I don't want revenge. The sheriff nodded. That's a good thing. Later that day, I met Grace Miller outside the general store. She smiled when she saw me. Daniel. Grace. She looked toward Luke, who was helping unload supplies. That young man hasn't changed. I smiled. No, he hasn't. She shook her head. Do you know how many years he's been helping people? I laughed softly. I think I'm still discovering that. She told me stories I had never heard. How Luke repaired homes after storms. How he delivered food to families who were struggling. How he helped elderly neighbors without ever expecting recognition. Every story reminded me of the same lesson. Luke never helped people because he wanted to be seen. He helped because he couldn't walk away from someone who needed him. That evening, I watched him teaching a young horse to trust him. The animal was nervous. Every time Luke moved closer, it stepped away. I expected him to force it. Instead, he waited. He lowered his hand. He spoke softly. Easy. The horse slowly approached. Smiled. You're very patient. Luke looked at me. Fear disappears when someone feels safe. I thought about those words for a long time, because I realized they weren't only about horses, they were about people too. For years, I had tried to protect Emily by controlling every part of her life, but love wasn't control. Love was trust. That night, as I looked across the ranch, I finally understood something. I had spent my whole life trying to become the richest man in the county, but the richest moment of my life came when I had almost nothing, and the people I loved stayed anyway. The day I had once feared became the day I was most grateful for. Standing on the same porch where Luke had first asked for my blessing, I looked back at everything that had happened. The anger, the mistakes, the betrayal, the pain. Every moment had changed me. If Richard had never betrayed me, I might have spent the rest of my life believing money was the answer to everything. If I had never lost my fortune, I might never have discovered the people who truly loved me. Sometimes life takes away what we think we need, only to reveal what we actually have. One evening, Emily and Luke came walking toward the porch. Emily was holding something in her hands. Dad, I smiled. What is it? She looked at Luke, then back at me. We wanted you to be the first to know. My heart started beating faster. What happened? Emily smiled through tears. We're going to have a baby. For a moment, I couldn't speak. A grandfather. After all the years of worry and fear, I was going to have another piece of my family to love. Hugged Emily tightly. I wish your mother could see this, Emily whispered. I think she can. I looked at Luke. His eyes were filled with happiness. Thank you. He looked surprised. For what? For loving my daughter the way I always hoped someone would. He smiled. Thank you for trusting me. I laughed softly. I should have trusted you a long time ago. Later that night, I walked alone to Sarah's grave. I carried a small bouquet of flowers and sat beside her. Sarah. The wind moved gently through the grass. You were right, I smiled. You were right about everything. I told her about Emily. I told her about Luke. I told her about the child who would soon run across the ranch. Then I whispered the words I had wanted to say for years. I thought I needed to give our daughter a wealthy life. I looked toward the ranch lights in the distance, but she never needed money. My voice became softer. She needed someone with a good heart. I thought about the young cowboy who arrived with a broken truck and worn-out boots, the man I had judged before knowing him, the man who had nothing to prove, but still proved everything. When Luke first came here, I thought he had nothing to offer. I smiled. I was wrong. He had the one thing money could never buy, a heart full of love. When I returned to the ranch, I saw Luke and Emily sitting together on the porch, the same porch where our story began. Luke looked up. Everything okay, Dad? I smiled. Everything is perfect. I sat beside them and watched the sunset cover the hills with golden light. Our ranch was smaller than before. Our bank account was smaller than before, but my heart had never felt fuller, because I finally understood the truth. A person is not rich because of what they own. A person is rich because of who stands beside them when everything else is gone. And as I watched my daughter, my son, and the family we built together, I knew I had finally found the greatest fortune of my life. Not in land, not in money, not in wealth, but in love, loyalty, and family. The very things I almost lost while trying to protect them. Richard Hayes had been my friend for nearly 20 years. We built businesses together. We attended family events together. Trusted his advice more than almost anyone in the county. That was why his words carried so much weight. Daniel, Richard said, placing his coffee cup on the table. I'm only saying this because I care about you. I looked at him. I know. Then listen to me. He leaned forward. Emily needs someone who can protect her future. I glanced out the window toward the ranch. I've protected her future my entire life. Exactly. Richard smiled. Don't throw all that away because of some young cowboy with nothing. Before I could respond, Emily walked into the room. Dad? She stopped when she saw Richard. What's going on? Richard smiled. Just a conversation between friends. Emily looked at me. About Luke? Nobody answered. She already knew. Richard stood up. Actually, I brought someone who might interest you. The front door opened. A young man stepped inside, wearing an expensive jacket and a confident smile. Emily, she immediately recognized. Him. Brandon. Richard placed a hand on his son's shoulder. My son has always admired you. Brandon smiled. I'd like to take you to dinner sometime. Emily looked uncomfortable. I appreciate that. But, Richard interrupted. Think about it. Brandon stepped closer. I can offer you a stable future. Emily looked confused. What does that mean? It means you wouldn't have to worry about anything. She looked at him carefully. And what about love? Brandon smiled. Love comes with time. Emily shook her head. No. Richard frowned. No. She looked at me. Dad, can I ask you something? What? Do you actually care about what kind of person I marry? The question hurt because I knew the answer she feared. Of course I do. Then why does it feel like you only care about what he owns? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. She turned toward Brandon. I don't need someone to buy me a comfortable life. Brandon looked surprised. Then what do you need? A person who will stand beside me when life isn't comfortable. The room became quiet. Richard forced a smile. Emily, you're young. You don't understand how the world works. She looked at him. Calmly, no. I understand exactly how it works. She turned to me. Dad taught me that character matters. I lowered my eyes. He taught me honesty matters. Her voice became softer. He taught me family matters. She looked toward the door. That's why I chose Luke. After she walked away, Richard shook his head. You are making a mistake by allowing this. I looked at him. Maybe. He seemed surprised. Maybe. I nodded slowly. Maybe I don't know everything. Richard laughed. Daniel, you built this ranch because you knew how to make the right decisions. I stared at the floor. Or maybe I built it because I was afraid of making the wrong ones. He didn't understand. But I did. That night, I sat alone on the porch. The ranch was quiet. The stars covered the sky, and for the first time in years, I questioned something I had always believed. Maybe being wealthy wasn't about what a person could give. Maybe it was about what a person was willing to sacrifice. I didn't know it yet, but the biggest betrayal of my life was already moving closer, and the man I trusted most was the one who would take everything away. A few days later, Richard arrived at my ranch with a folder in his hand. He looked excited. Daniel, I have great news. I stepped onto the porch. What kind of news? The expansion project. I frowned. I thought we were still reviewing everything. We were. He smiled. But I moved things forward. I looked at the folder. Already? Daniel, opportunities don't wait. He walked past me and entered my office like he had done hundreds of times before. I followed him. He placed the papers on my desk. This deal will secure the future of your ranch. I opened the folder. The pages were filled with legal words and numbers. I read a few lines, then stopped. You know I hate this paperwork. Richard laughed. I know. That's why I have lawyers. He tapped the documents. Everything has been checked. You are sure? He looked almost offended. Daniel, after all these years, do you really think I'd put you in danger? I looked at my old friend, the man who had stood beside me through difficult times, the man I believed I could trust. No. He smiled. Then sign. I held the pen. For a moment, something inside me hesitated. Small voice told me to slow down, to read every page, to ask more questions. But trust has a dangerous power. It can make you ignore the things you would normally see. So I signed. Richard, close the folder. You won't regret this. I forced a smile. I hope not. He shook my hand. Believe me, Daniel, this is the beginning of something great. I watched his truck disappear down the road. At the time, I thought I had just secured my future. I didn't know I had just handed someone the weapon they would use to destroy it. 3 weeks later, my entire world changed. My lawyer arrived at the ranch looking worried. That alone scared me. He never looked nervous. Daniel. I stood up. What's wrong? He placed a stack of papers on the table. We need to talk. I looked at the documents. What are these? Contracts. I know that. His expression became serious. Did you read them before signing? The question bothered me. Richard told me everything was handled. My lawyer closed his eyes for a moment. Daniel, what? These weren't investment papers. My heart started beating faster. What are you saying? You signed ownership transfer. Agreements. The room went silent. I stared at him. That's impossible. It's not. No, I grabbed the papers. My ranch. He nodded slowly. A large portion of it is no longer yours. I couldn't hear anything else. The walls around me felt like they were closing in. 30 years. 30 years of work. 30 years of memories with Sarah. Gone because I trusted the wrong person. I stood there holding the papers with shaking hands. And one painful truth finally became clear. The man who promised to protect my future was the man who had stolen it. I drove straight to Richard's office. Don't remember the entire journey. I only remember the anger burning inside me. The man I trusted for 20 years had destroyed everything I built. When I entered his office, he looked up and smiled. Daniel. I threw the papers onto his desk. What did you do? His smile disappeared. Lower. Your voice. You stole my ranch. I made a business agreement. You lied to me. He leaned back in his chair. You signed the documents. Those words hurt more than I expected. We were friends. Richard looked away. Friendship and business are different. I stared at him. No, they are only different to people who never understood friendship. He sighed. Daniel, you built your entire life around that ranch. You should have known when to move on. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You planned this? He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence told me everything. I walked out without another word. By the time I returned home, the entire town already knew. Funny how bad news travels faster than good news. The same people who once came to me for advice suddenly avoided my eyes. The same people who shook my hand yesterday now crossed the street when they saw me. I learned something painful. Many people respect success. Very few respect the person behind it. That evening, Brandon came to the ranch. I already knew why Emily stepped outside. Brandon, he looked uncomfortable. I think we should stop seeing each other. Emily almost laughed. We weren't seeing each other. He looked away. You know what I mean? She nodded. Because my father lost money. He didn't answer. She smiled. Sadly, thank you. He looked confused. For what? For proving that I made the right choice. He left without another word. I watched from the porch. My daughter had lost a wealthy future, but somehow she looked happier than ever. Then I saw Luke walking toward the barn. I expected him to look worried. I expected him to ask if I still approved of him. Instead, he simply said, "Morning." Daniel, I looked at him. You know what happened? Yes. You know I can't offer Emily the life I planned. He nodded. I know. You know this ranch isn't what it was? I know. I waited. I expected hesitation. I expected doubt. Instead, he picked up a hammer. Where do you want me to start? I stared at him. Why? He looked confused. Why what? Why are you still here? Luke smiled. Because nothing changed. Everything changed. No. He shook his head. The only thing that changed is what you own. He looked around the ranch. The people who love you are still here. Those words broke something inside me. For years, I believed money was what kept people close. Luke was showing me the truth. Love was what remained when money disappeared. Every morning after that, Luke arrived before sunrise. He repaired fences. He fixed broken equipment. He worked beside me without asking for payment. And slowly, the man I once judged by his empty wallet became the man I admired for his full heart.